Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again this week. Barry and I were just talking about last week. We were talking about self-esteem and how to raise our self-esteem, and then somehow we segued into basically the present moment, and about how we can sometimes set ourselves goals that are so far. And I think you use the analogy of fog, and sometimes when things are so far ahead, it's like in a foggy situation, you can't see the next step until you take the next step, and then something is revealed. So I think it's a fascinating subject, and I know both Barry and I have had examples of this in our life. So why don't you go ahead, Barry, and share one of your foggy moments?
Had a few of those as well, yes.
Sure you have. So have I.
Well, I want to just put a premise on the table first, just to really play with this, because something I've heard many times about that. There's the challenge a lot of people do is they do live in the past or live in the future. And there are certain teachings about it. One of them comes to my mind. I'll share what it is. But the understanding that we tend not to live in the present moment, oftentimes because either we're busy backing away from the past and don't want to repeat what happened in the past, or we're remembering the past with fondness, or we're looking in the future hoping it will change from what we have now. And we miss, like you were saying in last week's episode, about we're missing the gifts that are in the present moment. We're missing the wonder of being in the present moment. And the thing is that is kind of the silliness about this whole point is the only thing happening is in the present. So we can't actually live in the future or the past because they don't exist. They're only in our minds.
Exactly.
So that's the episode over. So now we move on. No. But the truth is, that's it, you know?
But I know, I love what you're pointing to, and that is exactly it. What it is we are so hijacked by our thinking about the past or the future that we're not fully present to what is going on right now in front of us. So yes, there's only one thing, which is the present moment. But it is having that awareness again of going into our personal mind, which is that mind where, as I say, we do a lot of the comparing and a lot of the fear of the future and the threats of the past and all that busy mind, monkey mind, busy mind, whatever we want to call it. And when we're up there, we're in a daydream, and we are so not present to what is going on exactly in that moment. And an illustration I have constantly, because I do a lot of I walk with my dog, especially my new little baby or 7-year-old husky that I've got, that I did not research huskies, that I rescued, and he likes to take me on at least a 4 or 5 mile walk a day. But I listen to a lot of Audible books, and it's amazing. And I think this illustrates how our thinking, what it does, because when I'm present and I'm listening to my audiobook, I'm hearing every word. And then all of a sudden, something just pops in my mind, and I start thinking about something, and I haven't heard a single word of my audiobook for about a minute, and I have to put it on rewind and re-listen to it. And that's how insane it is that when we get lost in thought, how it takes us away from what's actually happening in the moment. Because the words on the audiobook are still going, but I am so caught up in my thinking that I can't hear a damn thing. I think that's fascinating.
That was just me that did that. I didn't know it was you as well.
I've friends.
It's so true.
Yeah, and they do. They say, "Oh, I can't listen to Audible. My mind drifts too much." But it just does illustrate. To me, that's the perfect illustration of we are either present or we're not. We're either lost in thought or we're present. So.
And that's the thing that we have. I mean, we have this amazing thing called a mind, the brain, that does all this thinking and all the processing and stuff, which is great. But the challenge we have with that is that we tend to sometimes be so not present to how we are the master of it, and it becomes the master of us by pulling us into memories, thoughts, everything else, that we don't get to stay present. So that's one reason people talk about meditation being difficult. Why some people love meditation is because it is a methodology, one of many, that brings you into the present moment to keep you still. You know, just that there's I think Vietnamese monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away.
Yeah, the one that just.
Yeah, who basically had something about walking meditation, about how I did one of his walking meditation with him years ago when he was in LA, where basically you made mindfulness, the action before, during, and after every single step you take.
Mhm.
It's excruciating when you haven't done it first. The first time you do it, because it's like the focus, because it isn't effortless. That's the challenge about this. You think being present would be so effortless, but it's not. It's a focus and a drive, and of course, as soon as you focus, your mind goes somewhere else. I'm like, no, come back, and it's like, come somewhere else, come back, and it's that thing, because, for example, one of the things I also talk about is when you drive somewhere familiar, when you're driving home from work, or you're driving somewhere else that you go regular times. How many times do you realize you got to where you're going without realizing what you did?
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
just
Autopilot.
because your mind thinks something else. And so we do have, and this is one of the blessings, thankfully, of being in the human body, is we have an autopilot that generally keeps us safe. But it's that thing that we don't recognize how present we can be with it, and we start losing ourselves into what ifs, thoughts, processes, future, past, whatever that is, that doesn't help us stay where we are. And so, yeah, the audiobook is a great representation of that, because if we are listening to an audiobook, which ideally we want to listen to every word to get the value from, and yet we don't.
Mhm.
What is our priority?
Yeah. Well, and going back to what you said for a second, because a lot of people beat themselves up because they say, "Oh, I can't meditate. It's too hard. It's whatever." And I'm not a believe it or not, I am not a big meditator. I've done the walking meditations, the Thich Nhat Hanh. Oh, I always get it mixed up, but I've got the three words. I'm just not
Yeah.
sure the order. So the
You know what we're talking about.
or Thich Nhat Hanh, one of those. But I've done the walking meditation, and I do better with those. I do better with some movement in the meditation. But the thing is, I actually don't think we have control over our minds as much as we think we have. We can't control the thought that pops into our mind, but we do have the free will or the control of whether we want to stay attached to that thought, or whether we want
Right.
to, I say, sort of gnaw on it and let it take us off and hijack us or whatever. But the actual, that popping into our mind it's just random, it's energy, it happens to us. That we do, I believe, we do not have control of, and I think life would be very, very rigid if we tried to fight that every second. I think to just allow it to be like, oh, how interesting, that one popped in, and you just don't try and wrestle it and remove it or fight with it. You just watch it drift on. You just let it just
Exactly.
pass through you. So, but going back to what you were saying about it's very much about being in the present moment. But again, I think it's the awareness of how much time is spent worrying about a future that, as you say, is potentially never going to arrive. I think it's what is the percentage? It's something ridiculous. It's like 96% of what we worry about doesn't happen. And when you
Yeah.
realize that you are robbing yourself of what is this beautiful moment that we have, like when you look at all the things around us, the taste, the smells, the visuals, everything to be grateful for. And we're in our heads anticipating something like 96% of what's never going to happen. I mean, how sad is that we've given up our present moment for that? Or the other way, which is thoughts of regret of the past that's already, the present moment that's already disappeared, but we spend time there worrying, judging ourselves, thinking about how we could have done it differently, or using it to flagellate ourselves with, oh, we made a fool of ourselves, we did that wrong, we failed. And again, it's like, wow, as you said, that we have control of 100%. The time we spend in those places.
You said about how sad is that? That's the question. Like, the thing is, that's the problem. When we start judging it, that's what gets in the way. The thing is that one of the skills is to, when something we look back at in history, what is it we can learn from it, and then be done with it.
Yeah.
That's really the thing we can do with it, if possible. But yeah, we tend to do postmortems and resurrections of things that happened in the past, thinking if we could just do things differently, even though it's already done, gone, complete. But we tend to try and do that, or we go in the future and we have these future fantasies about what ifs, oftentimes negative ones, frankly. Because most people have vision.
Well, I shouldn't say always, most of the time negative, because it's that preparation, unless it's anticipatory, we're looking forward to something great. I have a sister once that used to she always used to say, aren't you excited about Christmas? Aren't you excited? And I say, well, it's Christmas. It'll be what it'll be when it arrives. And she's like, I just can't believe you could not be so excited about Christmas. Every Christmas, it was like, I'm never doing Christmas again. This was so disappointing. And it was because she had brought it up.
You set stuff up and you can put it down again. Yeah.
And I always enjoyed my Christmases because I had no expectation it'd be other than whatever arrived on that day. So
that's one of the best secrets to life, frankly, is that just not to have low expectations, but just simply to be unexpected about what's happening and to let it happen the way it does. But I want to bring something back in because since we are talking about relationship mastery as our podcast,
yes,
the thing that we do in relationships oftentimes is we second guess what happened with past issues in our partnerships. If there's something that's bugging you that much, have a conversation with your partner and say, look, this has been on my mind. I want to go back and I wanted to go back and fix it, but I can't do it. Obviously, I want to bring it in the present and can we resolve it and do something about it then? Because one of the things about relationships as well, same as in our own personal lives, it's like no different there, is in relationships, we often carry a view of the world that isn't in the present moment. We're looking back at what happened yesterday in the argument we had, or the one thing didn't go perfectly, or the future that we think is going to go bad, or the person's going to do certain things, rather than simply being present. Oftentimes people, and this is one of the things we challenge, like we talked about with meditation, or doing walking, or listening to audio tapes, audio books, not audio tapes, audio books. In relationship, when we're looking in our partner's eyes, sometimes we get pulled out by something in our mind that's pulling us away. So the question becomes, is what's more important than the present moment for you? I'm just giving you this as a question to hang in the air for somebody who wants to consider it, because frankly, all the good stuff happens in the present moment.
Exactly.
And in relationship especially, yes, it's nice to set up dreams and visions with your partner, saying next week you're going to go on vacation next year or whatever that is. But to be present with your partner for more than 2 seconds could be a massive shift in your relationship with your partner.
Yeah.
So that's an assignment for after this episode's over. Just upon that scene.
And I just want to add something to that because it's beautiful. We use the phrase, or when I teach it's looking at your partner with fresh eyes. Fresh eyes means the newness of the moment. And I'm not, and I know that sounds naive, and a lot of people, but so many people when they go into their interactions with each other, it's so loaded with baggage from what happened this morning or last week or whatever. But I love what you said. Clean it up. Have a lovely conversation, not an attacking conversation, but a pure. I always say, be curious. When we're curious, we're open to hearing what the other person has to say. So we don't go in there with you did this, you did that, this is how I felt, you made me feel this way. There's a curiosity of, I had some, feelings whenever it was, when you said this, a lot of feelings came up for me. I'm curious what you meant by that. Be open to hearing, not deciding, I know what they meant by it. They meant to hurt me, or they meant to do this. And when we are curious with each other and we inquire rather than tell the other person what they were thinking and doing,
right?
We're much more open to receiving information. And then what that does is it clears the deck in a way, so we can come together again with those fresh eyes without this sort of hostility or resentment that we may have built up. And resentment, these are all shows I'm thinking of that go really deep, but I always say resentment is just, it's actually you're angry with yourself for having suppressed something and not spoken your truth, and that leads to resentment. And it's really yourself you're resentful towards, because you're the one that put the cap on what it is you wanted to say for whatever reason, and then you take it out on your partner. You're just silent and hostile, as opposed to having, it takes courage to say, especially when things are going well, to say, I was upset last week or this morning. You're like, oh, really? Do I need to bring it up? Well, you sort of, if you have feelings about it, it's better to bring it up and clear it out than just push it down and bury it, and then it pops out or comes out sideways at a later date, and the other person's going, where the hell did that come from? Oh, it came from 3 weeks ago when you said this. I just didn't tell you about it.
Right. Well, one of the things about resentment is that we tend to use somebody else's, other person as our scapegoat, rather than taking on the ownership ourselves of what we didn't feel. So that's one point. The second point I want to make, though, is one recommendation I've had with clients for many years with coaching, and some of my friends as well who do this, is you need to have a weekly or a monthly State of the Union meeting with your partner about your relationship, because this sort of stuff we're talking about here are things that accumulate because we didn't talk about them. If you take a time like every Tuesday night or whatever night it is to say, let's have a meeting, just talk about what happened, not as a blame game, But it's like, when this happened, I felt this. Again, ownership languages, we talked about that before in previous episodes. But how to really be in a place where the relationship gets fresh and renewed, because you said about fresh eyes, it's easy to be fresh with each other. Interesting doubling when you're there, but to be fresh in the moment with each other, when you're not carrying all the crap from the past you haven't talked about before. Because some crosswords or some action happened, and the other person goes, "Oh, I didn't even know it happened. I'm so sorry. Let's clean that up." Then it's done, over, easy.
Exactly.
When it's been sitting there for 3 years, it becomes a problem. So have regular touch connections with each other, to touch base, to be in the present with each other, and say, "I'm aware that 2 nights ago I felt this because of what happened," and the person goes, "I didn't have a clue." So it's those sort of opportunities to clear the air so you can be present is a good part of this process.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think, again, some people can do the sort of spiritual bypass, and it's like, that past, why should I bring it up again? It's already gone. But I do think that, most of us, if we're really honest, that human part of us, like we talked about last week, that being that 1% human, that 99% spiritual, but that 1% human is pretty intense. And that when we come from that space, we don't often really truly let things go. We carry them with us. And it's carrying an event that has already passed and bringing it into the present moment. So you can't be present. You can't see and feel what's right there in front of you. I think that's very important. It doesn't mean that you drag everything, from the past up all the time. I think it's to bring it up and then have it sort of agreed upon that you can both let it go now. This is something that you've discussed. But again, I think this is a huge conversation for something else, that we're really talking about that State of the Union. I know other people that do that too, and I think it's an excellent addition to a healthy relationship. But back to the moment. Back to the moment.
Coming present again.
Future shows. What also came up last week when you mentioned it was about the goals, and I wanted to talk about this a lot. I think sometimes, and again, I know we're not talking, but we're talking about the relationship we have with ourselves in this sense. Sometimes we have such visions of our future or a goal we should be obtaining that we don't allow ourselves the freedom to change our mind. I mean, we're like, no, I committed to this, I have to do this. And one example is when I came here on holiday when I was 21, I studied art originally. I'd gone to art school, then I went to college to do fashion design. And then I decided I actually wanted to go back and do psychology. And in between, I had somebody wonderful give me a free ticket to America when I was 21. And I came here and I never went back. And that was because I was wearing something I had designed, and I was on a boat in the Marina del Rey, and somebody came up to me and said, "Oh my God, where did you get that jacket? It was pretty unique." And I said, "Oh, I made it." And they were like, "Oh, you made it? You can design and make things." And they said, "Give me your number and I'll get you work next week." And I thought, "Oh, yeah, sure." And he called me and he said he worked for a big costume house in Hollywood. He worked with a lot of directors and costume designers and stylists. And I was hired while I was on holiday to make something for a show. And that was then I just ended up staying here. And that to me was, now if I had just been like, "No, I'm going back to college, I'm going to do, I'm going to study psychology." And I called my college and I said, I just had this thing happen to me and I'm in Hollywood. And they were like, "Stay, follow this." Because in psychology in particular, they wanted people that had life experience. So I followed that thread, and because it was right in front of me and it was exciting. It wasn't my plan, but I followed it. And my life, when I think if I had just said, "No, I'm going back to my original plan," even though I was feeling a bit like my insides were like, "Oh, that's a bit, I can do that anytime." And whereas this was like such an opportunity. So I'm bringing that up because I say often it's like there are incredible golden threads in front of you right at your feet that you don't notice because you're looking so far ahead. You're not in the present moment. You're looking so far ahead, you miss them. And so it's a wonderful thing to just in that moment, just look around and go, what is pulling me? And I don't mean in one of those, what's the shiny ball thing we did a few weeks ago, like, oh,
No.
where's the shiny ball? That more interesting, sparkly thing. I'm not talking about that, but just opportunities or things that present themselves to you. I call them sort of like, I don't know, the little nudges you get, like, go there, go there. And when we're in the present moment, we hear that nudge. We hear that inner voice. We hear that inner guidance saying, try this, try that. So
Yeah.
I think that's a very important thing to again, that's a relationship with yourself.
Well, that's the thing I'll underscore in another way, which is that it is sometimes we miss the obvious things happening right in the moment because we're so distracted by other things, like you're talking about the audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what if the most profound insights can drop through your audiobook, but you're not listening because your mind's somewhere else?
Mm-hmm.
That understanding about being present, yes, you don't have to keep hitting rewind on the audiobook in that case, but also those opportunities. And we talked before, and I've talked about certain in my work about how opportunities keep coming back again and again. However, it's better if you, or more, I should say, more opportune to see the opportunity in the moment to really act on it and respond to it, so you can actually see where your life goes. Like you were talking about with the golden threads. We oftentimes, when we go to the grocery store, this was for the singles out there, by the way, for the singles. If you go to the grocery store and you're going shopping, you may be so focused on what you're getting, you may not notice the perfectly wonderful person who's standing next to you, who may be the perfect mate you never knew you needed, sort of thing. But unless you're present, you may not notice that. So I'm teasing that one because the things for many people that listen to a show because they want to get tips on relationships, being present is a fundamental way to meet somebody who you want to be with, because they'll see you as being very present with them. One of the gifts of being present is you're more fully expressing, so to speak. You're more fully embodied, which means you're more magnetic.
Yeah.
So speaking of dating and romance, stuff like that, because I know going on first dates, I've been on a few myself and noticed sometimes how easy it is to not be present with the person. So to be in the present moment can make you stand out from the crowd in a very unusual way. And so I'm a big fan of being present because it is, one, it's more what's it looking for? More fun things happen then, but also you become more noticeable. And in fact, here's a little tip: makes you more attractive.
Yeah.
So
that's so funny. I can tell you how many times a very nice man has said, "Excuse me, I'm looking for this in the. Can you help me find this on an aisle?" Or the grocery store can be one of the biggest pickup places.
I know, absolutely. I recommend it.
You might be having some of your clients. That's so funny. And but it's true. It is so true. How many people are not present when they are talking to other people? They're either finishing off their sentences, or they're either so in their heads about thinking about, oh, what do they think of me? That you're just not present. And this is definitely another show, because this is a big, big subject.
So here's another bit into this, just to make, which you may see for another too.
Okay.
Because you said something there, just like, oh yeah, of course, is when we do have conversation with people, it's so often that we are actually listening to that person, so we're listening. We're actually not even listening to them anymore because we're building our response to what they said. And the thing about conversation, this is one of the things I think we have a challenge to work with, because we have this whole thing about how we are polite in conversation. Is like, there's no gaps allowed in conversation. Somebody's talking, you got to respond right away. So we've been trained almost a way to not actually hear the last part they're saying, because we're preparing an answer in our head. Because again, you can't focus on the two things type thing as easily. Although, well, in this context. So if you're in a conversation with somebody, can you be present enough with them to be in the present moment until the last word they say, and then consider the answer you want to respond with?
Yeah.
It may take 30 seconds after they finish talking for you to respond. Can you be in that uncomfortableness and actually discomfort and actually have that time available? Because we don't tend to be present in our conversations. So that maybe it's easy for another show too, but just that alone is a good lesson to learn.
Yeah, well, I think that's the same show that I was suggesting.
Yeah.
It's so important. There's nothing worse than seeing somebody chomping at the bit, trying to, respond, because halfway through you haven't even said what you were going to say. It's infuriating, actually. But
right.
But yeah, it is. It's that same thing. It's that it being in the present moment, taking in, being curious. And I always say that too, just be curious. Even, if somebody does have that habit of jumping in and just be curious to hear everything the other person has to say. Can you just zip it up and just listen, There's so many areas of life. I mean, I think this is what we're hitting on today. So many areas of the benefits of being present, whether it's the benefit of hearing your inner wisdom, because I think we cannot be lost in thought and listening to our inner wisdom at the same time. I mean, sometimes our inner wisdom screams at us to be heard over our mental chatter that's going on in our heads. But if you really want to hear that inner wisdom, that guide that's telling us what that next step in life is, it's to slow down, quiet down, and be present.
Yeah. So if you haven't understood so far in the show, there are 17,000 reasons why being present is a good thing. Because that's the thing. There's so much in here we're talking about that is really only available to you when you're present. And so being in the present moment, living the present moment is absolutely so potent, so powerful, and so supportive. Because again, like you were saying, that inner voice, that inner guidance, that wisdom that comes in, it won't be heard if you're somewhere else in your mind.
Exactly.
So being present, staying in the present, however you do that works for you, definitely is a good idea.
Yeah, and just to finish up on that one as well, just when we're in the present moment, very, very rarely is that saber-toothed tiger, attacking us. When we're in the moment, most of
impossible.
Yeah, it's a sort of peaceful place. So So especially for those that suffer from anxiety or anticipatory anxiety especially, we create the anxiety by being in our personal mind, by listening to that sort of fearful chatter of a future that's potentially never going to arise. We are creating our anxiety. So that alone, knowing that we, as I said before, we can't stop the thought that pops in our head, but we do have free will as to how much we want to sort of grab onto it and make a meal of it, as opposed to it's just a fleeting little thing.
Right.
So we've touched on being present with our partners, listening to our inner wisdom, less anxiety, not missing on the present moment. I mean, there's so many areas. I mean, throw in a few that you can think of that I just missed there, Barry.
Frankly, just little example. I go hiking every morning. I've done it for the last 3 years. I have become much more aware that I need to keep my wits around me. I've it's so easy to get distracted when I'm listening because I have my earbuds in. So I listen to audiobooks or listen to radio, so I don't notice what's going on. The amount of wildlife that I notice now when I'm staying present, just the enjoyment of that, the ability to walk up and down the trails and actually say hi to people who I actually look up and see them versus looking at my feet because I'm just totally in another zone. It's the simple things in life. They sound so simple, but the juice of life, the joy of being in the 1% of the experience, is so much more fulfilling when you're in the present moment. Our life happens in the moment. It was a Ferris Bueller. If you don't look, you don't notice. You might miss it. It's that idea is that when we're in the present moment, you can experience life fully. So stay present is where it really happens.
Yeah. And I just thought of one more too, which you touched on, which is being present with our partners, how much richer that experience is when we're fully taking them in, when our minds are empty of all our preconceptions and, like I said, what they did last week or whatever, to fully be in the present moment to, oh my God, I didn't notice that wonderful little thing about them. I mean, I've been with them for 30 years, but how did I miss that?
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah, it's incredible. Well, thank you, Barry. That was another wonderful chat there.
We've got more coming, it looks like.
Yeah, I've got my little list here for all the future shows we keep touching on. So we'll see you next week. And thank you, everybody else. Thank you so much for joining us and spending your week with us this evening.
Thank you indeed. We'll see you again. See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.